Okay. You wanna-
And will you be?
I'll stand here
You
just so
stand
that
here.
I can
I'll go in this side.
make it easy for you.
So I grew up in South Central Kansas. I grew up on a dairy farm, and I worked with the Kansas Rural Center for 20 years on sustainable agriculture and farmers markets. And I've been with the Kansas Land Trust for 14 years. I should add also I farmed in partnership for a while with my family as well. And the Kansas Land Trust is a private nonprofit. We've been around 32 years. And if you'll flip the next one. This is our mission. What we do is preserve land that has ecological value, agricultural value, scenic, recreational, or historic value. And we preserve it in perpetuity. What we do is essentially hold development rights. And that land stays in the current land uses in perpetuity. And we do it through a legal tool called a conservation easement. And so if you own property, you probably have easements placed upon your property already, like utility easements. This is actually a conservation easement in which it restricts or holds the current land uses. Next slide, please. What we do is protect habitat. Next one. We also restore habitat. This is actually a public park in Lawrence. Next one, please. We also have properties that have public access. 6 of our properties, about 1,700 acres, 1,300 acres have public access. Next one, please. We also conserve carbon sinks. These lands will be perpetually sequestering carbon. Next one, please. Some of our properties have endangered species. This is a Mead's milkweed, which is a threatened species. We have 7 properties that have this plant on it. Next one, please. We also protect prairies. This is the Spring Hills Ranch in Chase County. Next one, please. We also protect class 1 and 2 soils. This property is right east of Eudora. Next one, please. We also preserve beauty, and this is the Potter Prairie in Gary County. Next one, please. So why are we here? In 1990, there was an Elkins Prairie. It was the largest virgin prairie in Douglas County, and the county and city were working to preserve it, take ownership and preserve it. It was sold by the Elkins family to a new developer, and the developer plowed it up overnight. And so those people actually tried to protest, stop the tractor. It was actually, the story is covered in the New York Times. So after that prairie was plowed, and if you're familiar with Lawrence, it's where Rock Chalk Park is, where Lawrence Memorial West is. That was a prairie at one point. And so the people that were there wanting to preserve that prairie thought, what could they do in the future to protect places that have a real value, and we want to protect it in perpetuity. And so they learned about land trusts. There are land trusts all across the country. There's about 1,500. Most are on the coast, a lot of them are in the Northeast, not so many in the Midwest. And so they created the Kansas Land Trust. Next one, please. We have preserved over 40,000 acres. Next one, please. That is, if you put them all together, that's about the size of the city of Topeka. That's what 40,000 acres is. Next one, please. And this is where they're scattered. The larger the star, the bigger the property. They're all in eastern Kansas. Some are around Wellington. A lot of them are around Fort Riley, right up here, Gary, Riley County. That's because we have a partnership with Fort Riley to protect property so people don't complain. There's not large wind turbines that interfere with radar. We also want to protect habitat so certain species don't become endangered, like prairie chickens. So we have a partnership with them. And then we also have some properties that are conserved in the Flint Hills. And you can see a lot, since we're located in Douglas County, we have about 11 properties that are protected there. We don't have any properties protected in Leavenworth County. I was just counting up in my mind. I probably have had 8 inquiries. One was really pretty, I thought was going to go forward, but the family decided to do their estate planning and to conserve the property upon the death of their father. So it's actually 3 properties, prairie properties that were just sort of south of Leavenworth. I've also had inquiries around the larger area of Leavenworth. Sometimes they're just exploratory. Anyway, so there are inquiries, but we don't have any properties that are protected in Leavenworth County. Next one, please. I'll just go through some. Buck Creek is, you go next one, please. It's 800 acres. It's 3 different easements, but it's now owned and managed by Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks and Tourism. So it allows hiking and also hunting. It's along Buck Creek. Next one, please. And the Lick Part one is in Douglas County. Is the this is the Lawrence Nature Park. Next one, please. So it's about 100 acres of hiking trails, about 6 miles of hiking trails, and we have preserved about of the 100 acres, about 50 of those acres. And I'll just go back and tell a story on this one. The Lick Parks were they took their kids in the 50s and had picnics out here. And around 2000, they wanted to preserve it because they knew that it would all be developed. The largest developer in Lawrence is right next door to this property. My son was running through this property cross country. He saw zebras. He couldn't figure it out why he saw zebras there. It's because the largest developer has a zoo right next door. But the Lick Parks knew it would then develop large houses. And so what they did, they conserved it with us and then gave the property to Lawrence. And Lawrence turned it into a park. What we are is the watchdog to make sure it stays woodlands and not houses. That's our role. Next one, please. This is a very unusual one. This is in Johnson County. So next one, please. It's about 114 acres, but they also have a state-of-the-art disc golf course on it. That it's private land, but they allow the public to come on it and raise funds for special profits, for special projects for nonprofits. And the next one, please. And the Blue River runs through that property. And the next one. Oh, we'll just go through these quickly. This one is, we're working on this one right now. It's across from Amazon warehouse right here. You know where old 81 Speedway is, it's right here. And so we're going to conserve it hopefully in 2 weeks. And the 2 couples that own it want to do it in honor of their parents. This is Virgin Prairie, class 1 and 2 soils down there. This was prairie here. It essentially has been neglected, so it's low quality woodlands. And so we'll get an appraisal on it in a week. And my guess is it's going to be about $2 million. They're going to give up in development rights to conserve it. And so they're giving up quite a large charitable donation because they want to keep it intact and not turn it into warehouses or commercial industries. So we're working on that right now. Next one, please. And this one is around Wells Overlook Park in Douglas County. Next one, please. This one is in Butler County, a prairie, but it's a very nice prairie in Butler County. Next one. This one is right south of Forbes Airfield, and it's residential development all around. It's almost 480 acres, and that would all be houses because there's asphalt roads all around it. So we have a lot of road frontage, but they also want to conserve it. So next one, please. I'm not sure where I'm at. Okay, we'll stop right there. And I have an exercise to kind of illustrate how conservation easements work. Do I have a volunteer? Somebody with some land in mind? It's pretty simple. You just have to exchange sticks with me. Who's a volunteer?
Right here.
Mom will take you. Why don't you come here? And your name is?
Crystal.
Crystal. And do you have some land in mind?
Sure.
Okay, why don't you talk a little bit about the land? You hold the sticks because you're a property owner.
Okay.
Okay, tell the group here. You want to stand over here? Let's stand over here. Tell us a little bit about your property.
160 acres.
160 acres, quarter section. And what's on it?
Mixed use,
Mixed use. What do you mean by that?
and bottom ground.
Cropland.
Cropland.
Okay.
There's some native prairie on it.
Oh,
Endangered
nice.
species,
Pardon me?
with endangered species.
Well, such as? What kind of species are on it?
Wildflowers, milkweed.
Okay, so it's a very nice prairie. Has it ever been tilled? Is it? It's virgin?
Half of it got tilled, half of it's still native.
Okay, 160. How many acres of prairie?
20.
Okay, what else is there? Is there a stream, woodlands?
There's some ponds,
Okay,
woods and walnut groves on the hillsides.
on the hillsides. Is there a stream running through this?
Not really. There's some springs that feed the ponds, kind of
Okay.
the beginning of the creeks, but nothing.
And do you live on the property?
I do not.
Does anybody live on the property?
A family member does.
Okay, so there's a house
There's a house.
and barns.
There are a stone house and stone barns.
Wow. So, okay, so there's probably some outbuildings.
Right.
So you have cropland, you have 20 acres of prairie, you have some woodlands, and you have a little farmstead. That's historic, it sounds like, because it's stone building.
It's about 8 years old.
Okay. Anything else unique about the property? Okay. So are you thinking about, you would like to keep it as prairie and as cropland and woodlands? Why?
Family, piece of property that was developed by our family, and it's a place where we enjoy going and productive. Was a dairy, now it's cattle operation. And
So do they graze the prairie then, or do they put up hay? Oh, even better, okay. So it sounds like a pretty attractive land. Is it threatened by development? Is it close to residential
Yeah.
areas or commercial areas?
The whole southern half of our county is up for development now at 2.5 acre lots,
Even your land?
everything around
Okay.
us.
So what a conservation easement does, and we're not the only land trust in Kansas. There's the most well-known is Nature Conservancy, which is international. They have a Kansas chapter. There's Ranch Land Trust in Kansas that tends to work in the foothills, ranches, and some out west. And they're like some other entities like Pheasants Forever and Ducks Unlimited have also done or want to do some conservation easements as well. So there's different entities, organizations that do conservation easements. And a conservation easement is a legal agreement between Crystal or a landowner and a land trust, such as the Kansas Land Trust. And the way it works is we divide her bundle of sticks. So we're just going to do this as an example. You as a property right owner have property rights that are described like in your title work or in your deed. And if she was to consider a conservation easement, she would divide some of those rights between herself and her family, whoever the owners are, and a land trust. And so as an exercise, we're going to go through that. So why don't you pick out a stick and just read it for us?
Educational uses.
So generally, educational uses is something that might be shared with your permission. We could do educational uses. So if we were going to do this, we would probably hold this as a right or an opportunity for us to do education. What else?
Gravel extraction.
Well, you don't have any streams on your property, so we would take that and that's probably, I don't know if that's a threat or not, but we would hold that right.
We've already picked up the loose rocks and built buildings.
Okay.
Describe burning.
You can have prescribed burning, so you can just put on the table, that's yours. Because we encourage prescribed burns.
Crazy.
That's your decision. You can raise it, or you could say, I want it to be only a hay meadow in perpetuity, but that would be your decision.
Hunting stand.
That's your, we never restrict hunting. That's your decision.
Sell the property.
Sell the property? Yeah, you can always sell the property.
Owner liability.
You're liable if something bad happens on the property. You hold that one. As much as you want to give that to us, we won't take that.
Building a new house.
So you have a current house, and what we do is kind of draw an envelope of where the structures are. And generally, we restrict it to just one house. So if you wanted to build a new one, you would have to remove the existing one that's there. Or if, yeah. So you would retain that right, and it would be your decision or the people following you whether or not they want to build a new house or not. But there would only be one habitable residential unit on the property.
Plow the prairie.
Now that one is, that's why we're here. So that's, would be very important to us to protect that prairie.
Cell tower.
Generally, we would take that as well.
Ag building site.
That would be in your building site envelope, so you can put that there.
Oil well.
Do you have any oil leases? Okay, so we would hold this.
If the oil lease was there, does that change?
That's grandfathered in.
Okay.
She couldn't give that away unless you bought that out from them. Would I like to hold the oil leases? Yes, but we have properties that have oil wells on it. They're a problem. You know?
Remodeling an existing house.
You can do that.
Oh, my favorite. Subdivision.
We hope. So that's a real key one. That's a real key one. Now, some of our larger properties, we have allowed subdivision. It's not my preference, but that was what the landowner wanted. So it's negotiated.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
I mean, if you allow subdivision, what's left in the,
Well,
conservative?
All that, we still hold these rights.
Right.
It's just split it up among multiple owners. And I'd rather talk to Crystal and not you and you for the same property, because I only have one contact, you know? That's our preference. You know, I talked about the one around Wells Overlook. They need to have, they're gonna have 3 subdivisions on it, because they need to sell those off so they can pay off the mortgage. It's a hard decision, but we agreed to do it. Does that answer your question?
I think I'm just trying to conceptualize. it,
Right.
Because I mean, so that means that however many, let's say it's zone, 2 acres, 2.5 acres, they can build that many houses, but you would still own a conservation easement on each of those subdivided parcels. Is that?
If with Crystal, she cannot subdivide it, right? But let's say it was 500 acres, and she wanted to retain the right to divide it in half. So we would have to negotiate, can there be houses on each side or not? That'd have to be negotiated. There would be building envelopes that say, this is where all the permanent buildings are. It can't be anywhere else. But with all the remaining 250 acres and 250 acres, we still hold these rights. So it can't be further subdivided. You can't put a house somewhere else. You can't plow the prairie. You can't clear cut the woodlands.
And you're also not really, when I hear subdivision, I hear like suburban subdivision, with house and house and house and house down the street. When you're talking about subdivision, you're talking about splitting a larger property into 2 or 3, not bringing in a housing developer.
Yeah, technically, when we say a subdivision, so if she 160 acres, she could say, I want 80 acres here and 80 acres here. It can't be further subdivided, and maybe one house would be on each 80 acres. That's when I talk about a subdivision. I'm not talking about a suburban area where you have multiple lots that are small.
Yeah,
I mean, that, we would have no interest.
So my past experience was municipal government, so when I would see a subdivision and a conservation easement, it would be a platted property where a conservation easement might be for a natural element like.
Green space.
Yeah, green space, group of trees or a creek or something along that line. So, on a so are these gonna be platted, would you plat the property? You're not platting the property.
Because we generally, I really don't want some.
So
Yeah,
how do you, control, then the utility easements?
they're already existing. So they're grandfathered in, so they're already there.
Well, if you're close to a new development, though, and they want to bring a sewer line across your property,
It'd be eminent domain,
well, they have to buy it out then. Okay.
which we've had, remember the Stewie one, the disc golf tournament? We've had 2 eminent domain takings. And one we went to court with, and the other one we just agreed to just do an appraisal of it. And so, since it's a property taking, they had to pay the landowners, Stewie family, and they had to pay us proportionally based upon the appraisal that quote of when we did the easement. And that is about, in those 2, one was a rural water line that went across it. And the other was they wanted a roundabout. So they took about 2 acres. But because of that, we're protecting the Emmerich property across from Amazon warehouse. Because what we did with those proceeds that came to us, we set them aside for another conservation project that we had. So actually, from our perspective, I'll never say this to the Stewie family. That's a good deal because now we're conserving 190 acres where they just had a water line along with a brome pasture along the street and a roundabout.
So that utility line.
So utility lines, will allow utility lines to your house, but not any other utility
So
lines.
those are the easements, though, utility easements.
Those are pre-existing.
Not always.
Well, okay, so essentially we're holding, stick gets divided between her and us because she needs to have utility lines to her house, her farmstead, but not outside of that. Unless there was, you could say, is there a water well that's out there that for livestock watering, that would probably be allowed. Generally, that's with solar or wind.
Clear cut woodlands.
Generally not. Now, you might have sustainable harvesting, but I will take
You
hold
don't
of that
want
one.
that, okay. They'll sod and topsoil.
So that's kind of an idea how conservation easements work. Crystal, you have any questions about this or comments? So it's a legal document. It's about 26 pages long. And then we have a baseline report that can be 50 to 100 pages long. But it describes what the deal is.
That she just gave up 2/3 of her, almost 2/3 of her bundle of rights.
Right. And you remember the Emmerich one?
I don't care about
Well,
Cambridge.
I'm saying,
Talking about mine.
I'm saying that with the Emmerich, this is going to be $2 million. The Stewie one was $3 million in 2008.
But aren't we here to try and to perpetuate our legacy to our children? And so you're taking $2 million out of my inheritance
That's
to
right.
them.
You are taking, you're actually giving, if you would do this, you're giving equity. That's right. That's right. Now, if you lived
Can it
around
never be revoked?
eminent domain, it has to be a public interest. And
But out of the goodness of your heart, the land trust is not going to give me back this bundle of rights that I just gave up.
now we would be in a lot of trouble.
I might be in a lot of trouble if I give you $2 million too.
I know. And that's why you have to it's a real serious commitment. It's not for everyone. And, for most people, it doesn't work.
But I can control what happens on my 160, but I can't control what happens around me, and that's the part that we have a problem. I mean, you're talking about subdivisions, can't subdivide ours. I don't want to. Maybe my kids do, or my grandchildren do someday. Maybe they have to someday. But what happens to the 160 or 100 acres across the road from me that is in my viewscape, if you want to call it that?
It is your use.
And I can't control that.
And they can't control yours. You can't either.
It is an interesting question. You kind of talk to that,
Thanks for sorting
talk
that
to
out.
that situation with Forbes Field
Uh-huh.
parcel that you have south. What generally happens? You get sort of like an island of green in amongst development, or will developers say, well, that breaks up what we want to do here, so they go elsewhere?
Well, you remember the Lawrence Nature Park? That's a certain area of green. By Bill Self lives there, Doug Compton lives there, right next door. So it is, and in this case, there's public access, so there's a public benefit from that.
And if you think the park, they would have had a road there. They would have put Peterson Road there.
It would have been, I'm sure, been a street.
How do you guys fight eminent domain though? Like how, I mean,
It's,
because if
I
you can't fight that, then what good is the trust?
you just have an ally with the public entity that wants to use eminent domain. I'll give one example. We have some cropland that's near Granby Plaza, which is near Junction City. And they're really kind of hemmed in by the interstate and by the river, and it's a very small parcel in the fort. And so they were looking for water, and they wanted to drill water on our conservation easement. The landowner didn't want it. So they hired an engineering firm from, I forget, Indiana, I believe. But they literally counted how many attorneys were on the board. They said, do we want to fight this or not? But if a court rules the taking, the extinguishment of part of an easement or all of it, they would have to, in the case of Johnson County, have 3 appraisers to value the taking, and then the proceeds are divided between the landowner and the land trust. But you're right, a conservation easement can't overrule an eminent domain proceeding with the approval of the judge.
What's some of the properties you're talking about are fairly large. What's the smallest property? Like, is there about
An
a
acre,
really?
Wow.
but we wouldn't do that.
No.
Probably 20 acres.
I didn't know at what point, how big does it have to be this sort of reasonable proposition?
There's funding for it, but also what's in that acre or a few acres? Is it going to be a valuable green public space in an urbanized area? Is it wetland? Does it have some real ecological value or public value? That can change the equation of whether it's worth it. Other questions? I handed out to you a brochure about us and also a summary, and this is cropland. What are sort of the rights that you would hold if you had a conservation easement, and what rights we hold as the Kansas Land Trust. And I will pass around, if you want to get on our mailing list, it's electronic newsletter. I will pass this around as well, and you can sign up and just give us your email for those who are interested. Any other final questions?
No, but thank you very much for
You're
being
welcome.
here tonight. I enjoyed the exercise.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
That was a good example.
And I'm just going to close this up. But you can go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just thank you for being here. All right, anything else before we close the meeting?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to make one announcement. So, we are a small group, but we've been incredibly active. And we have, well, yes, I'll get to that. Yes, there are cookies and water. Yes, so we can all have cookies and water. But I also, there is an annual report. Yes. Some of the things that we've been really involved with this year. I'm reading that. I'm really proud of the work and the leadership that Sherry has shown and the board. I'm really proud of a lot of the work that this group has done because it adds up to something quite special. So anyway, just wanted to.
I was gonna ask an odd eminent domain question if I might.
Okay.
I've been here, I've lived in Pontotoc now for a little over 20 years. And I recall when the Speedway was not there. I also recall that both Wyandotte and Kansas City, Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas actually used eminent domain for a private corporation. Have you seen that happen just in your experience, have you seen that happen very often other than?
I'm not a good person to ask because I don't see much action other than what's relevant to what we do.
I just think that's sad that a government would do that for a private corporation.
I'd have to check, I think Kansas passed a law after that. That said that
Howard
They
gets
can't
a
do
lot
that
they
done.
anymore.
can't use it for private development,
Okay,
I think.
I hope you're right.
Okay, so let's enjoy our cookies and water. Thank you, Hannah and Gretchen, for bringing the goodies. And is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I saw them.
Second.
All in favor?
I need a board.
Aye. All right, see y'all remote.
Thank you. Sherry.